Barking dogs. It is the bane of many owners' existence and is an issue that comes up in almost every training session that I've had with a new client. We'll usually go through the list of issues that are happening first, and then right at the end, just before I leave, they'll say, "Oh," and they bark all the time. So today we're going to go over why dogs bark, how we can manage their barking, and also how we can train them out of this. If you don't know me, hi, I'm Ella. I'm a dog trainer and I'm currently training to be a clinical canine behaviourist. If you are interested in my services, the link to my website will be in the description below. Right, so why do dogs bark? I think maybe the biggest reason why dogs bark is because they can. Barking comes under the behaviour of vocalisation. So for me, it's in the same group as yipping or howling or growling or grumbling. They are all sorts of vocalizations, and barking is just one of them. And dogs will do it simply because they can. They will also do it because it is a form of communication. Different barks mean different things, and I think it's really important for you to get to know what your dog's vocalizations mean. Some dogs are going to have a short, sharp bark when they're really excited or over aroused or they're in play. A lot of dogs have a sort of a woo when they're really concerned about something that then turns into a bark. You can look at their tune, their pitch, and the frequency of the bark to help you decipher what that bark might mean. Reason number 3 your dog might be barking is their breed is prone to it. And my advice is, if you don't want a dog that barks a lot, do not buy one of the breeds that bark a lot. Beagles, some sorts of trailing hounds, huskies, these dogs are known for their barking. I've said it before and I'll say it again. You might have or might know someone who has the exception to the rule when it comes to this. Maybe you have a silent beagle or a husky that doesn't howl, but never ever get a dog expecting them to be the exception to the rule. Expect them to be the rule. Another reason your dog might be barking is emotional expression. Are they excited? Are they over aroused? Are they nervous? Are they frustrated? Frustration is a big one. I see it the most maybe out of all of the feelings. When a dog is frustrated, that is when they'll bark, and we are gonna dive into that a little bit later. Dogs could also be barking because it's a learned response. This isn't something we ever really do on purpose. You might have accidentally rewarded your dog enough times when they sat and barked rather than when they just sat. Now your dog has learned sit means sit and bark, not just put my bum on the floor. And that leads directly into my next point of why your dog might be barking, is lack of clarity from humans. If we don't make it clear that we don't want them to bark and we are rewarding the barking, guess what? They're going to bark more. And then there's anticipation, which relates directly to frustration. If your dog is able to anticipate what is going to happen and they find what's going to happen either very exciting or very frustrating, we can just say over arousing, then they might bark more. This is especially true if you speed up to stop them barking and you're hurrying things up because you don't want them to bark, they're probably going to bark more. But what do all of these things that I've just listed have in common? What do they all do? All of them meet a need. Your dog is barking because it gets a need met. Now, this might not be a good way to get a need met, but maybe your dog doesn't need a good way to get a need met. Maybe they just want that need met. And so they're going to continue barking as long as that need gets met through barking. This is a really good time to note that you're never going to stop a dog barking fully. And quite frankly, we don't want to. Barking is part of their behavioural expression. I don't ever want to be in a situation where a dog feels like they can never bark. For me, that's just an unhealthy way to look at it. What we can look at instead is managing and training the behaviour. Let's start with management. The first thing you want to do is to identify your dog's triggers. When are they barking? Do they bark when you are too slow at getting a food or water out of your pocket? Do they bark at the front door or at the window when someone passes? Do they bark when guests come over? Do they bark at bikes going past them, or cars on the road, or other dogs, or children, or when you have a toy in your hand? I want you to get very, very specific about when they're barking. Is it when certain people come to the door or when everybody comes to the door? I want you to look at the exact circumstances in which your dog is barking, because this will directly help with step 2, which is prevention and management. I want you to prevent as much rehearsal of this behavior as possible. For example, if your dog launches themselves at the front door every time the doorbell goes and starts barking at it, I don't want you to give your dog access to the front door. If they're barking at people as they pass your house and you don't want them to do that, I want you to make it so they can't reach the window, they can't see out the window, they simply don't have access to the window or being able to see outside. The reason they're displaying this behaviour, no matter what the where, when or how is because it's reinforcing. So for some breeds and some dogs, guarding at the window or the door is going to be highly reinforcing. For some breeds, when they get over aroused when you're playing with them, barking at you is going to be highly reinforcing. If you're getting to the point in play where your dog is just yelling at you and that's something that you don't want and you feel uncomfortable with it, we're not going to get to the point in play where they get to yell at you. We're going to stop before we even get there. Step 3 in your management process for this behaviour is to meet their needs. If you have a dog that's prone to barking and likes to bark and finds it naturally reinforcing, we're going to find situations in which they can bark, in which you are happy for them to bark. Like I said, we're never going to stop them barking. So rather than create this tight life, this small life for them where they can't actually express themselves, we're going to create space for them to do that. When and where is appropriate. This isn't going to work for every dog, but I think it can really help for some. If you can create a behaviour chain that might be seen as a negative, because maybe not everyone wants their dog to bark, but for you it's a positive one. For you, you've changed it into a positive one because this barking in this area means they might be less prone to be barking at home or when you don't want them to bark. It can just be an extra tool in your toolkit for you and your dog. Another thing we can do with management is to become safely unpredictable. Predictably unpredictable. What I mean by this is that yes, your dog will get fed every day and walked or exercised or trained every day, but it's not happening at the exact same time every single day under the exact same routine. For a dog that is barking because of anticipation, which then turns into frustration because it's not happening fast enough, or they want it 5 minutes earlier that day, or they think something should be happening that's not happening, this can be really, really helpful. Maybe your dog gets fed between the hours of 7 and 8 in the morning, not dead on 7 and not dead on 8 every day, but somewhere in between there. For dogs that struggle with anticipatory anxiety, you need to be predictable enough that they know they're going to get their needs met and they're safe with you, but unpredictable enough that they can't usher you into doing something. Okay, now we've looked at management, let's go on to training. The first thing I want you to do in training is ask less of your dog. If the barking happens when you are standing still, when you're out at a coffee shop, when you are playing with them and you don't give them the toy quick enough, when they are at the window, I want you to just ask less of them. The truth is, we have not been clear enough in our teaching for them to know, hey, we don't bark when we're doing this. We have rewarded the barking in some way, or we have allowed them to rehearse the naturally reinforcing behaviour, like guarding at the window or at the door. One issue that I see a lot when clients come to me is that they want to be able to take their dog out for a coffee, or they want to be able to stop on a walk and take a break and sit down on a bench, but their dog is barking at them. In situations like this, ask less of your dog. It's no good dropping your dog in the deep end and expecting them to be completely chill with everything that's going on. We need to actually train the behaviour that we are looking for. For example, if you're on a walk and you can plan out there are a couple of benches along the walk and you want to be able to sit down and chill for 5 minutes, we're going to start with 10 seconds and then we'll go to the next bench and we'll do 5 seconds, and the next bench and we'll do 11 seconds, and then we'll go back to 3 and we'll practice that. If you practice this enough, it will become less frustrating to your dog because they know what's going to happen. What your dog learns through this time hopping of how long you sit on the bench is that for an unspecified amount of time, we're about to chill. As you go on with your training, you can gradually increase the amount of time you're sitting down. What I don't want you to get to the point of is where your dog is already barking at you. If you get to the point where you think the dog's going to start barking in a minute, I want you to move, I want you to get up. I don't want them to learn that that bark means you get up, because the truth is what's going to happen, your dog's going to be barking at you, barking at you, barking at you, and eventually you are going to get up because you don't want to annoy other people who are trying to enjoy their walk. Maybe there's people in houses around, your dog's making a lot of noise, they're starting to really build that frustration themselves, and you know you're not going to be able to calm them back down if they carry on, so you're going to get up. And then what does your dog learn? When I bark, they move. So we aren't even going to allow them to get to the point of barking. It's going to be so gradual and slow. Most dog training, if you haven't figured out by this point, is boring. It's a healthy amount of boring, especially behavioral modification. But it's going to be so gradual and slow that your dog's never going to get to the point where they get to bark at you. This process is the same when you're playing or training. Ask a little bit less of them. Make the sessions a little bit shorter. We want to practice not barking so much that it becomes the new normal not to bark. And if they do start barking, what you've got is valuable information. You've got new information. That's a trigger. Okay, when we get to this point, we need to stop. I think another thing you can do outside of directly training this is also teaching a really good settle. Teaching them to be calm and chill, and that they have a space that they can go to. That means not very much is going to be asked of me. All that's really being asked of me right now is to chill out. Being able to take that good settle out of the home and into pubs and coffee shops and on walks is amazing. The next thing I want you to add into your training is general confidence. Being able to watch or be in space with whatever's triggering them to bark. Honestly, that will be the key to turning the corner with your training. Working on gradual exposure, so habituation and counter conditioning, is going to help so much. The next thing we can do is train them with their frustration. Every dog will have a different reaction to frustration, and it's really important that you understand what your dog's is. For some dogs, frustration feeds them and they get more determined and can narrow down on something. For other dogs, frustration makes them absolutely shut down and they don't know what to do or where to go, and they'll just stop trying. For other dogs, frustration makes all rules go out the window and they're not really sure what's going on, and so they're just going to try everything. If your dog is barking at you, I am assuming that your dog is the third type of frustration. You can introduce your dog to frustrating games without you at first, so food puzzles and things like that. I'm going to say you need to make it easy enough that they don't need your help, that they're not coming to you for help. I have seen dogs who have been given food puzzles and it's too hard for them to figure out first, and they are the sort of either shut down or get too frustrated, so all the rules go out the window personalities. And so they end up barking at their owners. And the reason these dogs are barking at us, at their humans, and not the toy is because they have learned that we are what is giving them access to the thing that they want. You can then move on to including frustration within your training. Things like caging food with your hand. Things like It's Your Choice by Susan Garrett. Things like playing with toys and teaching them out and take cues. All of these include frustration, and we want our dogs to learn that that feeling is completely okay to be having. You can minimize this frustration with clarity. The way you go about minimizing frustration during training is with clarity every single time. Clarity can look like shorter sessions. It can look like using a clicker so they understand exactly when they've done the right thing. It can look like fewer repetitions of the right movement, the right behavior that you're after. I want you to think about breaking it down into such small increments that your dog can almost not get it wrong. I want you to set your dog up for success. One of the questions I almost constantly ask myself when I'm planning a training session or I'm setting up training or when I'm working with a dog is, how can I give them a win? If your dog is struggling, I want you to think to yourself, how can I give them a win? How can I make it so that this win is obviously a right answer for them and for me, and boosts their confidence, lowering their frustration and increasing clarity from me, so they're understanding exactly what I want. This usually means the questions are tiny. For example, if you want your dog to sit, it's them looking like they're gonna go into a sit. Or if you can get them to sit, it's releasing them from that sit almost immediately before the barking can even begin. But we can make the goals even smaller than that if we need to. For example, if your dog is barking at you when you so much as look like you're about to put your hand in a pocket or your food pouch to get a reward for them, we can work on moving where the rewards are, so having them further away from us, and teaching our dogs that just moving your hand slightly up and they don't bark, they get rewarded. The idea behind a lot of this is that there will eventually be an auto cue. For example, your dog barks at the front door when the doorbell goes. They will learn at some point with enough rehearsals that, hey, that sound, that doorbell is the trigger, not for you to bark, but for you to go to your bed. Me bringing out this toy is not the trigger for you to bark, but for you to take when I say the word take. Me putting my hand in my pocket is not the trigger for you to bark, but it is the trigger for you to wait patiently until I give you a food reward. What we really need to consider here, though, is what could build more frustration and make the problem worse. You simply stopping every time they start barking probably isn't going to help the situation for a dog that has already practiced this barking until they're blue in the face. As I said previously, you're probably going to give it to social pressure at some point. Maybe you have neighbours, or you cannot stand the barking for 1 second longer, or your dog will just get to the point where They won't listen to anything if you let them carry on barking, which brings us full circle to point number 1, which is prevention. If your dog can't handle it, maybe they don't experience it yet until we have got to the point where the training is solid enough where they can handle it, and then we gradually expose them and gradually increase time and the amount of frustration that they can actually handle. The biggest thing when it comes to training barking or to stop barking, to prevent barking, is patience. This is something that's probably going to take some time. Dogs who bark have usually been allowed to bark. What I have found time and time again is owners go like bark blind. They cannot hear the barking for some reason. You might know this if you have a neighbour whose dogs bark. They don't even realise it's happening half the time. Being aware of the barking happening and what the triggers are, management of some form, so preventing the rehearsal of the behaviour. This is usually in the form of environmental management. And then the training steps on top of that is what is going to get you to a dog that barks less. You are never going to fully stop your dog from barking, and we don't want to do that. We just want them to know when it is appropriate or inappropriate to stop the behaviour. I'm going to quickly go over some of the things I wouldn't do if my dog was barking. This is a short list. I don't really like to focus on what you shouldn't be doing, or rather what you should be doing, but here are some of the things that I would cut out now. Number 1, shouting at them, a quiet or a shh. I don't think that's going to help very much. Number 2, quiet on command. Again, I don't think this really works too well because the barking meets a need. Your dog is going to choose having their need met over pleasing you 99.9% of the time. I have so often found that it just encourages them to bark more. They're not getting what they're after by not barking. They are getting exactly what they want by barking. So what do you think they're going to pick to do? Because if I was a dog, I would just bark. Because at some point, you're probably going to give in because it's annoying. And that's what's happened every single time, even when you've cued me to be quiet and I've been quiet for 2 seconds. So I'm just going to bark. Another thing I maybe wouldn't do is teaching your dog to bark on cue. This can work for some dogs. This can have the opposite effect for other dogs. You know your dog best. If you want to teach them to bark on cue, that's absolutely fine. What I would say though is if you're teaching them to bark on cue, that means a continuous bark. Like with any other behavior I teach, sit means sit until the cows come home. Bark means you bark until I tell you to stop barking. It doesn't mean bark once, because I think that can actually encourage further barking. And that is my overview on issues with barking. Barking is a very unique issue to every dog. As I said, some dogs will bark because of frustration or anxiety or excitement. It's different for every single dog, and I would not have covered every single issue as to why dogs bark in this video. What I can say is that the rules apply to just about any situation in which the dog is barking. We want to prevent the behaviour, we want to identify the triggers, we want to meet the needs, and we want to train out of the behaviour. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any further questions, please pop them down in the comment section, and I hope to see you next time.